a family member could reasonably expect to encounter in daily life. And that changed. Especially with technology, it changed. Right? So if things happen regularly to family members that they neither understand nor properly cope with in an optimally healthy way, then it happens outside of their coping skill. How do they cope with it? Well, they will do what other people say if they can talk about it. Because that's another part. Being able to talk about it. All right? So addictive behaviors then are modeled from within the family or imposed by the environment in the absence of protective skill building from the family. Do you wish examples? Okay. Let's see. What would you think protective skill building would be for your particular demographic? Like right now, the class, as I can see, is majority female. So what's protective skill building past puberty?
Having your dad meet the lawyer in a date?
Uh-huh. With or without a shotgun? Kidding, but not so much. Right? Behind the door, right. Uh-huh. What else?
Going to church.
Going to church, okay. What else?
Double dates.
Double dates, okay. Good. My mom used to talk about mad money. Like he does something you don't like, and so you have bus fare or money to take a taxi, your own money. Like, you know, the value is, okay, if you're going out on a date, he's paying, right? Mm-hmm. Right? And you're also making it clear that you ain't no hoe, this ain't taking me out to get laid. That isn't the expectation. At least, yeah, again, and you make that clear. That's part of a protective coping skill. That's why dad is meeting the kid, right? And also the kid's family eventually. All right. What else along those lines? Because in the Ward and June Cleaver era, now, I'm a cynic. I believe most of the problems we're seeing today was happening then. They just weren't talking about it. But that's just me. So protective skill building from the family. So all those things, yeah. The dating rules, sexual mores, what if things go wrong? Are you drinking? You're not going to tell your parents about the drinking, right? Bring you home at a reasonable hour. What else? Oh, on the guy's side. So, guys, what did you get? Shaking your head, huh?
I'm not sure what I got. I guess religion.
Okay.
Car keys taken away.
Okay.
Curfew.
Okay. What? 11, midnight? What?
Usually it was like midnight.
Okay. All right.
That's all I can think of.
Were they assuming you'd be sexual?
You know, they never really talked to me about that.
Okay, so no birds and the bees talk, no...
Not that I can recall, at least.
Okay.
I grew up in foster homes and I had a foster family who didn't care where I was or what I did. I had a full-time job at 16 and my foster mom didn't know where I was.
Yeah. Okay. So, What happens when your family is the state? Then what's normal, and who do you learn what's normal from if...
I taught myself everything, and the majority of the skill building I have is because I was a single mom at 18 and I had to provide for my child. That's where the majority of my skill building comes from, because I learned how to sustain a job. I learned how to take care of myself. I learned how to take care of another human being. You know, I think it's just something that comes natural when you have to take care of yourself, because you learn those skills.
Do you think it's optimal that it comes natural? Natural?
I don't understand.
If you had your druthers to do it over again, would you do it the same way? Or would you have a guide? Would you prefer to have a guide, an adult guide, to guide you through that?
I probably, even if I had a guide, I still would have done it my own way. I'm one of those people can tell me things, but I still have to learn my way, and I have to do it my way.
Okay.
And if I fail, then I've learned my lesson.
Okay.
But you can tell me something, but that doesn't mean I'm going to listen.
That's true of many people. Here's the idea, okay? In terms of coping skills, you have to anticipate that a situation is going to happen to protect for it. If not, you learn through the college of hard knocks, that is by experience. Sometimes that's optimal, sometimes that's not. Sometimes you basically come to whatever is optimal for you through long experience in terms of making mistakes. So, some coping skills, as you pointed out, can come from within the person, even when they're not modeled in the environment. Okay? You know intrinsically what the right thing is to do, and you step up. That happens frequently. That happens within the material that is basically talked about developmental assets or also resiliency. It's basically noticing, yeah, this person came from a very high-risk environment, but they didn't replicate the risks. How did they do that? All right, so when we talk about adaptive distancing, we did talk about that here, did we? Remember that? The Venn diagram with the resilient child. Yeah, right. Yeah. So adaptive distancing. I'm not going to grow up like this or that person. Okay, daddy or mommy is sick, they have a disease that makes them act that way. This is basically coming from the school's attempts to do prevention with children of alcoholics when we were basically funded to do that stuff in the mid-'80s, early 90s. Funds started drying up to be able to do that kind of stuff. All right, so our field's become one of the delivery modes of choice for coping skills and addictive behaviors, usually as adults. Sometimes the simplest coping skills is teaching a framework that gives an understanding about what's going on and how to act proactively. So, for example, that public health environmental model is one. So the simplest, basically generic science, you start with the individual, their behaviors, and their family system or environment that creates the conditions that support the behavior. In terms of looking at coping skills, other coping skills have to kind of be created, because if you're facing a problem which nobody is talking about, you still have to learn a coping skill for that. For example, if your sexual orientation isn't heterosexual and you know that relatively early, you can't talk about it with people who are presenting as heterosexual. In fact, there's a taboo about it. So other coping skills basically happening within my family was just because that's our lineage. Black psychiatry, black psychology, racism was part of it. Systemic discrimination was part of it. All right, so short term, in terms of looking at addictions, getting them to stop in the short term, and then basically looking at some of the other factors that are driving the addiction that go along with supporting a healthy, non-addictive identity. So when I talk about the axiochemical model, the idea is that you have a culture. You have an optimal culture that may or may not be connected with, what you look like in the mirror. So, your optimal culture might not necessarily be the one that was presented in your nuclear family.
When you have a client, do you, like you specifically, because at least from my point of view, I feel like America kind of has a culture crisis. Like, people have a hard time identifying themselves, as having a culture, because America just seems to not really have one, I feel like.
Yeah.
So, do you emphasize that for people who come in saying, like, well, I think I'm kind of this and kind of that, but they've never focused on it before? Do you is that some kind of empowerment thing you use for them?
I and other people do. In those examples that I used, particularly where everybody except for Kathy was white and a white male, some people may appear to be white but aren't. So, for example, I was talking with a gang member, grew up here locally, basically in the system since he was 9. And that's 30 years ago. So he identifies as Native American, and he also said, yeah, if I had actually been exposed to that much earlier, I probably wouldn't have been involved in all the things that I'm involved with, because everywhere I went, I didn't trust these people. And I particularly didn't, like my parents, because instead of basically raising me, they turned me over to the system, which I definitely wouldn't trust. So, as an adult now, looking back, he's saying, yeah, well, if I had been involved with some of this native spirituality back then, I would have had to do the things that I was doing out of anger, and I was doing it out of anger because I was seeing injustice all around me and no way to really react to it. So I reacted out of anger, which, so for him, right? And, unless he identified himself to you, you wouldn't think of him as the stereotypical native, right? So I get to identify because obviously I'm not white, right? And though I did want to be white for 3 weeks in 4th grade because they were excluding me from games. I was being rejected, and what can I do to be accepted? And I realized, wait a minute, there's nothing wrong with me. It's their problem. Wow, okay. So fine, pick me last, okay? Now I make 3 home runs, won the game for you. No, I'm not sleeping over your house, forget it. You dissed me. We're just school friends for games, that's it. Not real.
Question, and it goes back to disassociation.
Yeah.
Is there different types of disassociation?
Yeah.
So like if someone had something really bad happen to them and they remembered for a while, but as time went on they stopped thinking about it and kind of just tried to distance themselves from it to the point where they forgot about it. You know what I mean? Is that disassociation?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
The clinical definition is going to be described in DSM, all right? So the reason I'm saying okay, is you might be describing, okay, you had a traumatic event that you forgot about, right? You buried it, and you moved on, and then it surfaces later, right? And then there are things that continually remind you of it, and so it kind of rears its ugly head, and you feel uncomfortable, and then you stuff it back down again. So that could be a form of disassociation as well. But usually when they talk about disassociation, you're basically cut off from reality completely. There is, I guess I could tell this story. All right. Sometimes this person is still alive, but it happened a long time ago, and I'm changing enough of the details, right? So this person belonged to a religious community in basically where they didn't talk about sex, they didn't talk about lots of different things as part of their religious beliefs and practices, right? The father took it upon himself to give his daughter sex education by showing them, with them, the oldest daughter, as they came of age. So she stuffed that, right? And eventually came to me over the period of a year. This is in high school. Wait, I know you don't use drugs, so why are you here? And she would just say hi. And finally, she tentatively got a boyfriend, got her to disclose that the sexual abuse was going on, mandatory reporter. She set it up that way, make the call, all the girls are taken out of the home. Dad gets mad, comes here, etc., comes to the school, tries to engage. The kids are taken out of the home. Eventually he goes to jail. Before, what got him into jail was she had what's called psychologically a fugue state. So how the fugue works, think of a Bach fugue. Multiple levels going on, multiple, all at the same time. Like a soundtrack, right? So, one track was what he said, another track was what she said, another track was what she thought and didn't say to him because she was afraid of him, right? Thinking in mind, this is wrong, you pervert, you, right? But he's a religious leader in that community. And her dad, right? So, boom, boom, right? So, she came to school one day after they'd been taken out of the home, thought she saw him and mom across the street from the school, and basically had this dissociative state, a fugue state, where brought her into the nurse's office because they thought she was on LSD. I said, she's not on acid. We're not here for her. Acid, she track us. We're not here. So she's basically laying in the nurse's office and running 4 different personalities of this event, and went through this cycle 3 times, and I recorded the middle one. An hour and a half of several episodes, unreeling like a recording. She wasn't there, and then finally it was done, she fell asleep and all that, right? So, and I looked it up. Wow, that's a fugue state, right? Now, I'm not clinically diagnosed, but that's what a fugue state was described in the literature, right? So we use that recording to put dad away. Unfortunately, we don't have the death penalty but that's just my opinion, right? Child molesters should be killed. No reprieve. But I can't say that professionally, but it is my opinion. And I know a lot of people share it. So especially, a person of trust like that. So essentially the church community that she was a part of basically distanced the family, excommunicated them, rather than giving them help.
I know a situation like that.
Yeah. There are a lot of
The
situations
church
like that.
distanced
Yeah.
him, and that's when took him back and he didn't go to jail.
So part of that, if your framework, your family framework of abuse is coming from within the home, how do you cope with that? How do you deal with that? Do you admit to it, to this day?
Is there ever a point where you actually just forget without any triggering?
Forgetting, no, you come to terms with it. Okay? Forgetting would be basically, would happen with brain damage. If it could happen at all. I don't think you entirely forget. I mean, most people that have gone through traumatic experiences say they don't forget. What they come to terms with is a relationship with the event or events that is less problematic for them. Okay? And part of our coping skills is to give them a framework for, okay, yeah, your suffering has meaning. Okay? And the meaning is you weren't destroyed by it. It made you stronger. You don't have to repeat the experience, but you can draw strength from the fact that you survived, and you can help others. You can give yourself purpose and meaning and, basically go on to have a better life. It's like the kid who, the Khmer Rouge, you know what they were? They were a communist group in Cambodia that basically took over Cambodia for a period of time, and basically anybody that wore glasses, displayed any kind of education, was killed. Millions of people killed. So this kid, Khmer Rouge came to his village. His entire family lived basically in a large hut, and they were all machine gunned. Okay, 23 individuals. He was the only one that lived, and he lived because he was on the bottom of the pile of bodies. After they left, he made his way to refugee camps controlled by the Khmer Rouge, where you were basically, forced to do things like build a pile of skulls, and if one falls off, they kill you. 2 years of that. Escapes. Is interviewed by a British journalist who says, because he's training now in Paris to become a doctor. And British journalist asks him, do you think about revenge? And he says, no. The people that did all those things to me were basically trying to destroy my dreams, and I think the best revenge is living well and making them happen. But, if you think, as an American, it's hard to even imagine, really? You're at the bottom of a pile of bodies, you had to build a pyramid of skulls, and you don't bear any ill will to the people that did that to you? You don't think about revenge? Right. Okay, so where did that coping skill come from? When you witness essentially genocide, survive genocide. Do you ever forget something like that? You don't. But you move on. You cope. Don't cope like Dexter.
What's that one guy's name? I don't know if it has anything to do with the genocide in Darfur, but a man who would kidnap children from their homes and have them be part of refugees camps and give them machine guns. And there's a big movement about it, about...
The Army of the Lord, the one in Africa? That one? Yeah.
Well, someone.
Jonas Savimbi or whatever? Yeah.
I don't know, something about... The America tried to do something about it. It was about speaking of the invisible children. Something like that. I'm trying to read, but there was something like that where the guy and his brother were taken, and they interviewed him too and asked if he wanted to help go find him and kill him and whatever. And he said, no, it's the only way. I've already won by living. So, it's crazy how they can have that mindset after getting grown up.
Yeah, well, you can. And the part of the thing is, so the reason I talk about axiochemistry and basically this element of culture is sometimes within your culture, if you don't have the right mindset, you can borrow one from somewhere else if it works, because it was basically developed to meet a certain human need, right? So after the last line there, after they stay stopped by creating healthier cultural responses. And what I mean by culture is it becomes every day, and you can practice it every day, and it just becomes who you are as part of that. All right, I'm going to leave these slides up because we actually have covered these before. Basically fits under the model of practitioner practice. DSM-4, we did that already. Difference between abuse and dependence.
from Rasmussen on the biopsychosocial model. Well, also the agent host environment model.
Yeah.
Would you use that one instead if you had a client? Are we just doing the biopsychosocial because it's a little simpler? Or?
Yeah. To the degree that it's simple. I mean, if you want to use the environmental model as a biopsychosocial, I've done that.
Is it just
But
family history and like
yeah,
pregnancy?
because, so for example, the family history is part of what happens with the host. Okay? So having the person talk about their family history, right? Because maybe, I mean, it really amazes me when people come to see me that they've never told anybody this stuff before. And it came out of getting in trouble, right? Whatever. So for them to like reflect it, really, this happened in your family, and because they've actually never necessarily stopped to reflect, and often the first time that people get to see this is in treatment. They would have never have done that, because where would you do it? You don't do that with your drinking or using buddies. What kind of conversations happen at a pot party? You don't talk about your stuff. You don't do that on the knees. So you could use that model. It has been done. I mean, I've done it. But most of the time in the field, they're not into that, because it's only been until relatively recently that to the degree that it's activism, I don't think it's activism. I'm saying I'm trying to affect a part of the system that's not just the client, and my job isn't just dealing with the client. It's actually making the system more responsive, because it ain't. So that was like political. Well, now it's part of our ethical training. We should be doing that. We should be going to the legislature. We should be doing this kind of stuff, because it's another part of the problem. We're trying to drain the swamp. Not make luggage out of alligators, but that wouldn't be bad too. So if you remember, yeah, you said this verbally, and I'm just giving this to you in a visual thing in case I decide to use it on the midterm, which I might. But understanding that's basically alcohol poisoning. So judgment memory compromised by 0.04, impaired coordination by 0.08.
Is this on Google?
It will be. I used it verbally. I told a story when I was showing you the alcohol chart, right? So blackouts can happen at any point after 0.08. So that's why I use the chart to determine where they're at. Then impaired speech, hypnosis, clinical anesthesia. They can't feel pain, no pain signal. They can lose their potty training. Losing their potty training, pissing themselves or shitting themselves is just above coma. And coma is when, well, you're breathing, your heart's beating, and you can be unconscious for like 4 days from alcohol. I've seen it happen multiple times. 17 pints of beer did that. Put this kid, a 17-year-old kid, in a coma for 3 days, out in the woods. He's at a kegger in the woods. Homeless guy said, "Yeah, you were at that kegger 3 days ago." His friends just left him there. So, consider the circumstances under which you would go to sleep for 3 days straight. Coma. Didn't come all the way back from that, because it's a coma. So breathing, heart rate. Breathing's the first thing to go. No breathing for 5 minutes. Lips turn blue. Heart rate. And then death. So 0.21 is the 100-pound middle school girl. 3 beers and a shot of vodka. 0.35 is college students, often hazing, fraternity, initiation, stuff like that. And then naive adults is somewhere between, so naive means you don't have a genetic tolerance, which, okay, so theoretically 0.45 to 0.50. So the LD50, lethal dose, it's a pharmaceutical term, lethal dose for 50% of whatever you tested it on. So usually they use rat models or monkey models and then just project to a 100 kilogram, 200 pound man. Okay. University of Oklahoma gave 3 grams of LSD to an elephant, which is 18,000 human doses. Died of a heart attack in an hour and a half. That's why they calculate that the LD50 for a human is 1 gram of LSD, which is like 5,000 doses at 150 mics. Yeah, right. It's like eating a sheet of acid, several sheets of acid, like you do that, really. Anyway.
It's really annoying thing about this, but hash oil
Yeah.
cannot put you into a coma because I mean.
I haven't heard that it could. But concentrates, like hash oil, concentrates, if you take them into the body, if you basically have cookies and stuff like that, or brownies or whatever, it's possible to put you to sleep. I don't know about coma. We haven't heard that kind of poisoning happening from that. You can get extremely disoriented, but...
Someone I know was sent to the hospital because of a hash oil pill or something, and the first thing that the person that was there that they noticed was incontinence, and then throwing up, and then turning pale, and then passing out, and he was just out of it for like 2 days. I just didn't know if it could put you in that seriousness.
And they did blood work that confirmed that it was THC, high concentration was THC that did that.
I didn't know if
Yeah.
it was that serious.
Well, it's a concentrate, so normally what that would mean is you'd have to, there are no circumstances in which you'd like eat, the running joke used to be, weed can kill you if you eat a pound of it. But, which means, ingesting a whole bunch of THC at a certain level, which you wouldn't necessarily do, eating it physically. But concentrate a lot of into a single dose, more than you would smoke at any given time. So who knows? But what you described, I believe it. Because we've never actually had, until recently, the technology to concentrate it like that. Even when marijuana was a pharmaceutical drug, okay, you'd have to drink a bottle or several bottles of alcohol tincture, and then is it the alcohol that's getting you off or the THC? Pre-sensimilla technology. So, process addictions. Self-injury, internet surfing, spending, certain forms of religion. Basically work the same way, engaging brain reward, emotional rush, letdown, seeking the high, and the high could be abusing somebody too. And other types, polypharmacy, polyprocess, ingestive and process addictions. And yes, cross addictions. So certain ingestive addictions make you prone to process addictions. So clean and sober workaholics, chronic debtors, sexaholics, relationship addicts, religious fanaticism, churches which suppress sexual education and whose members practice adultery, child sexual abuse, improper boundaries. And addictive organizations. Certain organizations function as if they were actively practicing addict, and they often produce addicts and codependents, and also as industries attract addicts and codependents too. So you can first of all suspect any organization that sells addictive products or services, any organization built along governmental or corporate lines, or even academic lines. Any organization with a high percentage of codependents, active or recovering addicts, for example, government, military, police, fire, healthcare, education, religion. I'm not saying that every place is an addictive organization, but we have a society that's built on lots of addictive organizations everywhere. So any organization can be addictive, but not every addictive organization is addictive everywhere, and not everybody in it is an addict or codependent. But be alert. So I don't like using war metaphors, but I like Frederick Douglass. A battle lost or won is easily described, understood, and appreciated, but the moral growth of a great nation requires reflection as well as observation to appreciate it. A man's character always takes its hue more or less from the form and color of things about him. Find out just what any people will quietly submit to, and you have the exact measure of the injustice and wrong which will be imposed on them. It is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. All right, so the systems you observed in your social recons were created without your input, and you accepted them as normal without questioning them. And part of what I've tried to do is give you a framework to begin questioning them, questioning what's normal, and acting to change it. All right? So the simplest analysis can be the public health model. So I did draw that. So here's a slide that just basically talks about it. The strategies are strengthen the host, neutralize the agent, change the environment. So here's where you could be truly dangerous if you want to use this model. You basically say to people, and I've said this to people, okay, you're seeing me for free. So if this works for you, you have to do this for one other person in your lifetime. Okay? So what I'm going to do is help you get clean and sober, give you an analysis of the environment that produced you so that you can change your environment. And then you're going to encounter people on the way and agents along the way. And you basically help other people to change their environment, get themselves clean and sober, and change the world. So not just getting you clean and sober. Every addict is a potential activist.
So the biggest thing to help someone become, recovered or whatever is to change their environment, right?
It helps. Or if you can't change their environment, if they can't change their environment, basically have them resist the environmental influences. Okay? I mean, I know people that, because I have to deal with people on both sides of the law, and people say, they say stuff in confidence, so when I see it happen often enough, so, okay, you're quitting your marijuana habit, and you're unemployed because you can't find any job, so you get trim work, marijuana trim work, pays well, and if you fall in with people that aren't smoking, in the trim room, great. But you're going to have some moral quandaries, and they do. Well, how do I, do this with I'm looking for a legitimate, above the table work, and nothing's paying this well. So, yeah, right. It's like at the gang symposium when the cop says, oh, well, right. This blood said Hewlett-Packard isn't hiring, but the Bloods are. Right. Okay, that's a reality. So here they are in this environment. Yeah, thanks. And they're having to resist and being clean and sober, and they're basically having to provide clean P tests without doing the things that people do to get illegitimate clean P tests. So can be done. Being in a toxic environment, it can be done. I don't recommend it. So those prevention strategies: primary prevention before the problem starts, secondary prevention early stages of problem treatment, tertiary prevention after treatment, and this is in a substance abuse context, it's usually relapse prevention. So, right. Okay, usually we strengthen the host, but if you only do one, you miss out on the others. So I work all three, but I wasn't trained to do that. I just came to the, okay, I got to do this or else it's not working here. So that's why I wasn't being ambiguous about the biopsychosocial. This is harder to do that and to write it up. Can be done. All right, so let's see, right? That's pretty much then how you applied the model to different disease conditions. Most things within the field come out of this model. Yeah, so let's continue this Thursday.
How often do you see one of your